Hi, I'm Yitzhak Berger. I teach Hebrew at Risha. Parashat Re'eh begins what's indisputably the legal, halachic part of Sefer Devarim. The first part of Sefer Devarim speaks of the history of Klal Yisrael in the wilderness and their conduct. And here in Parashat Re'eh we begin an account of the halachot that Moshe introduces, many of which are built on prior halachot in the Torah, but halachot that Klal Yisrael is expected to follow as they get into Eretz Yisrael, and some of which are relevant in the wilderness as well. The legal part of Sefer Devarim is really fundamental, as many point out, to the status of the Sefer as a covenantal document. It underscores the relationship between God and Israel, and the legal part indicates what it is that Klal Yisrael has to do in order to maintain their side of the bargain. If God is going to be their protector and be close to them, they have to do these things. And whereas when we read all of these laws, one can get bogged down in the legal detail, it's important to remember that the observance of the laws, as the Torah itself underscores, is part and is fundamental to what our relationship to God is about. And so the parsha begins, Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha u'kala. I'm giving to you today a blessing and a curse, and the blessing is if you follow the laws, the curse is if you do not follow the laws. Interestingly, one mitzvah in Parashat Re'eh that underscores this in a way is the prohibition of lo tosef alav lo tigra mimenu. You're not allowed to add to the mitzvot of the Torah or to detract from the mitzvot of the Torah. And on the one hand, this is understood in a halachic sense to mean not to add to the components of a mitzvah, not to detract from the components of a mitzvah, so that one doesn't add to the four minim, the lulav, etrog, hadasim, and aravot on Sukkot. One does not add to the duration of a mitzvah, so that if Sukkot or Pesach are 7 days, we do not add to the 7 days. The Ramban, however, in his commentary here, stresses that the simple interpretation of lo tosef alav lo tigra mimenu is not a nuanced detail such as that, telling you that you have to adhere to the components of a mitzvah that are prescribed, but rather that you're not allowed to add to the totality of the mitzvot in the Torah or to detract from the totality. The mitzvot are as they are, and the commitment needs to be to observe them as they are without adding to the Torah or detracting from the Torah. So whereas it's true that the individual mitzvot have parameters and those must be adhered to, in a more fundamental way, says the Ramban, in keeping with the context of Parashat Re'eh, it's the commitment to the totality that serves the greater purpose here. And indeed, something that I believe we've mentioned before in this context is that the Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha u'klala really parallels a formulation later in Sefer Devarim of Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom et hachayim v'et hatov v'et hamavet v'et hara. There at the end of Devarim, it's telling you, I'm presenting to you two paths, life and death, good and bad, and you have to choose life. And that is the global, kind of more general, universal challenge a person has to follow to set for themselves a proper course. Over here, though, the mitzvot themselves provide a context not merely for doing the right thing in all of its detail, but in making the commitment to do the right thing vis-a-vis God's mitzvot, not merely to take the right path, but to do the right thing when it comes to implementing that path. And so God presents at Tachayim v'et hatov, God presents at the end of Sefer Devarim at Tachayim v'et hatov, the good, v'et hamavet v'et hara, the bad, as the two paths a person can choose. But here he sets before us the bracha and the klala, meaning the mitzvot and the averot, and it instructs us to follow the specific mitzvot toward the larger goal of maintaining that covenantal relationship with Him. Shabbat Shalom.